everybody. Thank you for being here. It is 12:30 and we will get started with our public safety meeting. Today we have about 5 items and presentations on our agenda. So we will get started with the Grand Rapids Fire Department and the newest class of fire cadets.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here, especially after that budget presentation this morning. City manager did call out the cadet program in there, and the fire department and city has really doubled down on this effort. Under former Fire Chief Lehman, we fired up the first cadet program. We had 6 individuals in that program, and frankly, Deputy Chief Freeman and Lieutenant Welch, who's back here, really built that program as it went along, because we had no experience. We traveled over to Milwaukee. They've had a very successful cadet program across the lake, and so we brought a lot of that back. And we also learned a lot of lessons this first time through. So now we have our second class of cadets, a great group of young individuals. I'm going to turn it over to Captain Corey Kernoodle, the training captain, who'll give a very brief overview of what they've been working on, and then each cadet is going to introduce themselves and let you know where they're from and why they signed up for this program. Thank you.
So currently our cadet program is halfway through its 16-week program. The first 8 weeks they've learned a lot of basic fire skills. They've learned what we do, how we fight fire, and some of the work that we do. And the rest of the 8 weeks they're going to learn some of our EMS, the part of the EMS world that we do. They're going to become licensed medical first responders. And then the last 4 weeks of the program, they're actually going to ride on fire apparatus and kind of shadow some firefighters in their daily duties, and then take away from that their experience and hopefully apply and become Grand Rapids firefighters down the road. So we'll have each one come up and introduce themselves.
My name is Jawdat Mohagir. I'm from East Africa, Sudan. I'm joining a cadet program because I want to engage and be with my new community in Grand Rapids. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having us. My name is Tamar Williams. From Grand Rapids, Michigan, born and raised. I joined the cadet program because I want to introduce something new to my family. Not a lot of people from my community care about public service, and I want to introduce something new to the people I have around me. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Eric Kott. I'm from Comstock Park. I joined the cadet program to learn essential firefighting skills and also engage with the community.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eliseo Soyeto. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I joined the fire department to help me learn and serve my new community and to also help me with my transition from the military. Thank you.
My name is Ashton Eady. I'm from Saginaw, and I joined the cadet program to get firsthand experience of the fire department so I can develop myself into a really good firefighter.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Evan Zeich. I joined the cadet program, or excuse me, I'm from Grand Rapids as well. Forgot the order there. I joined the cadet program in pursuit of a career that is honorable and purposeful, that myself, my daughter, and my wife can all be proud of. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joey Vance. I am from the south side of Grand Rapids. I joined the program because I love to help people, so I know this is what I want to do, and I joined also to gain more experience and more knowledge of the fire department. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kennedy Ansmith. I'm from Grand Rapids, and I joined the cadet program because I wanted to learn more about the fire service, and especially Grand Rapids Department.
My name is Daniel Wonder. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I joined the cadet program because I love being part of a team and serving others.
My name is Colton Ellier. I'm from Rockford. I joined the cadet program because my dad is a Grand Rapids firefighter, and seeing him get to serve his community every day is something that I strive to be able to do someday.
Hi, I'm Matthew Silva. I'm from Grand Rapids. I've lived here for about 10 years. I joined the cadet program to help develop my skills and values alongside my diverse classmates here, and I'm looking to develop accountability to serve our community. Thank you.
He's going to say another word and then go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm coming back up. I just wanted to thank you guys for offering an opportunity like this. It's not every year that something like this comes around, and I just really appreciate it. Everything you put into us, we're going to give it back.
And then I'm going to introduce one of the cadets that's not here today. Ariana Weaver is a Grand Rapids City resident, and she wants to follow in her father's footsteps, who, served his community, served the nation as a Navy SEAL, and now she wants to learn how to serve her community. So she couldn't be here today.
We have a great problem here in Grand Rapids. I was over teaching at Staff and Command last week at Eastern Michigan University for fire service leaders across the state. We are the premier department in the state, and I have the great pleasure of weeding through hundreds, if not thousands, of applications every time we look for firefighters. The cadet program is a way for me to highlight and spotlight these bright young individuals right from our community and make sure I get a really good look at them and make sure that I remember their names as they go through my process. And so they're not guaranteed a job. We scrutinize them very heavily, we push them hard, but this lets them know what Grand Rapids Fire is about and lets us know if they'd be a good fit for Grand Rapids Fire. I have every intention of continuing this program under my entire tenure because I've seen so much value in it in 2 classes already. So with that, certainly open to any questions or comments you may have.
Colleagues? Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I counted correctly, I think it was 9 out of 12 are from Grand Rapids or the surrounding area. Is that
That's correct.
Right? So I think that's great that we're growing and retaining our own talent right here. And that's a huge testament to you and to your department and leadership. And to you all, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for your service. And I hope you feel supported by this body, but also by the City Commission at large. And if there's a reason that that's not the case, then please reach out. So thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to say congratulations to all of you and thank you so much for your willingness to serve our community. I can't love this cadet program anymore. This is awesome.
I'm right there with you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I appreciate you guys coming in today. My uncle's a retired firefighter, so I know what that can mean for a family. I love to see the diversity that's in this group. I love to see the enthusiasm and the homegrownness. So thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, want to extend my congratulations to this class. And I am so deeply appreciative of the diversity that's included as part of this staff. I also want to give my thanks to the military vet, and I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I couldn't quite catch the name. Thank you so much for your service, sir, and to all the others whose parents or fathers were also involved in the military service. I think that this is reflective of the desire for this city to hire the best. And thank you, sir, for your training sessions and recruitment process. We are all blessed and be a better city because of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
while I'm a transplant, and I've been there for 9 years now. I'm truly grateful, yes, for the homegrown, but for those that have made this their second home away from home. We truly salute you, and it's good to see also the males that are in a group, but also commend the females that have stepped up in this capacity, that thought it not a robbery to lift up in the midst of their service. We commend truly all of the training that's taken place, and we are, yes, expecting great things. We're here, yes, to push and make sure that you persevere, but we're here backing you up, and you have great support from this Public Safety Department. So thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues. And Chief, well done. It's, for me, very heartwarming to see some of my, what I call my sons, out in the audience. Joey, it's been a minute. It's good to see you in this space, and it's good to see all of you in here. I know how difficult it may be sometimes to change your surroundings and see something else that you can be and that you can do. So I commend you, young man, for wanting to be the first to step out and show others what can actually happen and how it can change your life. And for all of you to step in a space to serve others, it's a big step, and that makes you great leaders. So I am very, very grateful for what I see in front of me and what's going to happen in the near future. So thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you rolling around the city. All right, our next presentation is the wildlife management in the city of Grand Rapids. Is that you, Mr. Hurt? Yay.
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners, committee members, city manager, deputy city attorney. James Hurt, Managing Director of Public Services. I know it's been a minute since we've talked about wildlife in the city, and I wanted to come back and just give you a briefing on where we're at. It's been a couple of months. Just put in front of you our philosophy. You know, we try to share our ecosystem with all the wildlife in the city, and some days it's a challenge. And as we continue to dive in and looking at wildlife management in the city, it really is a sensitive topic for a lot of residents. And you have folks that are passionate on both sides. And you know, our goal is to try to get through this and come up with some solutions that we can look at in terms of a city and as a region. So that's one of the focus I want to talk about. And before I get into this, I'm joined today by Jerry Byrne, the Managing Director for the Kent County Road Commission. Jerry and I have known each other a long time, and he's here to kind of go through some of this as our partner, and as we review this from a regional perspective. I think we talked about this last time I was here. This isn't just a Grand Rapids matter. This is a regional matter. So we did hold a meeting with the Metro 6 cities. I'm not sure we went into too much of that detail with you last time, but the Metro 6 is Grand Rapids, East Grand Rapids, Granville, Kentwood, Walker, and Wyoming. And the leadership of these communities meet once a month to go over various things that are happening in the region, various things that are happening in each community, and it's really a good networking opportunity. So we met on February 28th to kind of talk about deer population in the Kent County region. Representatives that were in attendance were from the DNR, from the USDA, from Grand Valley State University, and Kent County. It was a really good conversation. And if you can imagine, each community has had some struggles one way or the other with how do you manage wildlife in your city, particularly deer. So the consensus by the group was to try to develop an integrated approach with all the stakeholders in our entire region. This includes townships, and to come up with how do we evaluate the deer population, and how do we look at any kind of potential measures that could manage the herd. As you can imagine, Kent County, and it really came out when we talked with the DNR and the USDA folks, Kent County, if you left Grand Rapids, within 10 minutes, you are almost in a rural area, whether it's farm fields, wooded areas. So the approach that we're looking at really includes an urbanized approach, a suburbanized approach, and a rural area. I mean, how do we come up with some sort of strategy that would accommodate all these areas within our county? One of the first things we talked about was developing a survey tool that we would send out to residents to give us some feedback from their own perspective, their own experiences that are happening in their neighborhood, in their yard, out in, whether it's in the rural or urbanized area. During that meeting, the Kent County Administrator, he agreed to convene a task force
to evaluate this process. So we met again on March 27th, and of course, we talked about wildlife management with the Metro 6. From that came a task force representatives that would come from cities, from the county, and from the townships. Jerry Byrne, I think, is representing the townships.
That's correct.
Because if you can imagine, the Kent County Road Commission has roads throughout this entire region area from the county standpoint. How many roads that run through all the townships? So that has been formed. They're beginning to start looking at how do we meet with stakeholders throughout the region, and before we even started getting towards trying to implement any kind of solution, either this fall or this winter. That might be optimistic, but we're shooting to try to have something in that time frame. One of the other things that we started talking about as a region was how do we gather data from the public works agencies that are picking up carcasses throughout the whole Kent County area. That's a good data point for us to manage, because we know those are getting hit generally by a car. And that tells us where some of the car deer accidents are happening that may not be being reported. I think we might have talked about this last time, but Grand Valley State University did some work with the city of Kentwood in terms of assessing their deer population. They went out in the evening times, at nighttime, and tried to measure how many deer, like per square mile they had. So Grand Valley is being part of this as a partner. Kent County has agreed to engage them to do more throughout the entire county. If I'm not mistaken, there was 6 individuals. 6.
Well, we're still meeting with Grand Valley. We have a meeting next week to go over it again and look at a proposal they're going to bring to us and how they intend to measure, survey, and then we're going to put some input, come back to the Metro 6 and talk about input.
Okay, because we're on camera, you're going to have to come to the mic and speak.
I'll give you that in a second.
All right.
So just to continue with that, we are in full-fledged trying to put things together in terms of a study, not only from the city standpoint, but from the county standpoint, and to come up with some solutions that might work for each community. And it could be different solutions, depending on where we're trying to address those issues. But my report to you would be I'd be coming back in the next couple of months to give you another update, try to keep this on task. So now I'm going to turn over to Jerry. He's going to give you some information in terms of the stats, and then we'll leave you with a little pamphlet that you can take with you. And then he can speak to more about what the study with Grand Valley.
Thank you, James. The Road Commission really looked at it as a safety issue with the number of accidents that we're seeing. We're picking up over 4,000 deer a year in Kent County. There's far less crashes reported. There's a number of reasons for that, but we're looking at it as a public safety issue. And what we've talked about, we have a great relationship, and we think regional is a way to address this, like many other issues in safety. And the deer don't know jurisdictional boundaries, and we need to address it because those deer are going to continue to move. We've also looked at what's going on in the southeast part of Michigan. They are also addressing this issue. Kent County has the luxury of being the #1 car deer accidents in the state. Occasionally, Oakland County takes that away from us. But we are, like James said, a diverse group, a diverse environment, so we can go within 10 minutes and get into rural. So if you look at those kind of statistics, Michigan, you look at the number of crashes, Michigan has 58,000. That's increased by 13%. Kent County, the harvest has gone down. There's a number of reasons that the harvest goes down. There isn't the interest in hunting. There is an interest in hunting for food, so that contributes to the deer population. The thing that really sets out for the townships is 25% of all vehicle accidents in the 21 townships are car deer accidents, compared to just 4% inside the cities and villages. So for us, it's a huge public safety, transportation safety issue. And again, it needs to be a collaborative effort between the cities and the townships if we're going to be successful. The strategies may vary. They'll probably vary within your city because you have a diversity from east town to the west side in geographic. So it's a diverse. I think what we want to caution is we need patience in this, okay? I come from operations where we like to solve things within 2 weeks and we're done. This is a more complicated issue. This is going to take time and a strategy that works because, as James said, there's strong feelings for a deer management program. There's a strong feelings as we should just let the herd continue to grow. So there's a lot of diverse ideas in this, and it's going to take some time. I would not be as optimistic as James. I think it'll be spring before we have strategies that we can roll out to the 6 cities and the 21 townships. It needs to fit everybody. And quite honestly, I've been in conversation with our neighboring counties. There's some interest there because, again, deer won't stop at a jurisdictional boundary.
Thanks, Jerry. This handout right here is some of the stats that Jerry just read off. We're going to leave those with you. We have some copies of this for you. This one I wanted to share with you. I think this is really important data. It's every township that's in this, or every jurisdiction that's in the county in the 2022 time period for all the motor vehicle crashes by municipality. And if you can just scroll down, if you just look at the city of Grand Rapids, 5,911 total crashes. And if you look over to the right, you'll see 84 of those were car deer accidents. Grand Rapids is not the #1 car deer accidents on this list. Actually, it's Plainfield Township, if I'm not mistaken. Which you can expect. You got higher speeds, could be part of the freeway system. You have rural areas, which is where more of the car deer accidents are happening. Some of the concerns that we've heard from our residents is not necessarily the car deer accidents, which is something we should be concerned with. It's more of them eating all their flowers in their backyard or their plants or their vegetation, or becoming a nuisance with what they're doing after they eat, right? That happens to be in their yards. So that's some of the concerns that we hear, which is probably not so much an issue you would have in the rural areas. But wanted to give you this update. We are moving forward. I know the task force has been convened. And like I said, I'd like to come back in a couple of months and just give you an update on where we're at. Happy to take any questions for Jerry or I.
Colleagues?
Has there been an increase in signage to make the motorists aware in the area regarding this capacity?
I can speak for Kent County. We did a study over 25 years ago, and that study came back that signs had no impact in the number of car deer collisions.
Ed?
Last time you presented, we talked a little bit about this, and there's a group that I think that deserves attention or referral to is Native Americans. They are working real hard on wildlife management in the Plains states, but that same mentality is here. And not only do they have a better way to harvest, but they also have federal money now to help with processing the meat. And so there's lots of things hanging out there that might be worth looking into. I just encourage you to do that.
One of the professors that we're working with at Grand Valley is a Native American, is aware of these opportunities. So that is part of it.
Good questions. Anyone else? Thank you for this. As I was looking at this flyer, a couple of notes that I had jotted down was, the decrease in harvesting, and some of those questions came back. Is it the timeline for hunting, licensing, all of those things that kind of compile into the why, and then extending the season, a little bit longer for people. But then also you think about access to purchasing guns and where they're used, and what that impact is on the community. But also I'd be interested in seeing, are they updating that study around signage? Because I know for me, I live, closer to a rural area, and so I know the spots and I know what to look for when I'm driving down the road. But I think people tend to, when you see those signs, you tend to look a little bit more. And since that was done so long ago, is there the opportunity to include that in some of the research that you're doing right now?
And I think the data that we're going to collect on the actual locations that hit will help us determine that. So I think that can be part of the solution for sure, is the signage. So by all public works keeping track of that through Grand Valley Metro Council, it will give us that tool to look if that's an opportunity.
Great.
One thing we like to stress in Kent County, though, because we look at the entire 2,000 miles, there's not a mile there that we don't pick deer up. We pick deer up in the S-curve, okay? So while those signage is important, the motorists in Kent County need to realize on any given road, from the S-curve to 22 Mile, the deer are there.
City Manager?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for the update. Real briefly, I had an opportunity to be part of a collaborative intergovernmental meeting with representatives from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I remember a discussion from one of the contractors who talked about life cycle and harvesting, and then ensuring the meat that gets harvested gets to nonprofit organizations and places in the community where there's food deserts, and they would come and have agreements with communities to harvest and then ultimately get them to food banks and shelters and other places. Is that still a service that is procurable? I remember him too saying that there were challenges in making those kind of connections.
So the answer is yes. I've been in contact with some of those food banks in Grand Rapids. There is an interest, there is a need throughout the county. The issue is who's going to pay for processing. I have talked to processors, and I think the reality of it is we in government need to find funding and not rely on donations for people to process the meat, because there is a huge demand, there's a huge need, but in talking to processors, they're willing to donate a little bit of time, but if this is going to be a sustainable program, we need to fund that processing. We cannot depend, this is my opinion, but we cannot depend on volunteers to process that food 12 months out of the year. So I think we're talking about money. It's about $100 a deer roughly to process venison.
Any other questions?
So it looks like we need to come up with about $40,000.
We'll probably be back to talk about the cost of the study before we talk about the cost of the processing. But I think both are important.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other questions, colleagues? We'll be looking forward to hearing that update. Thank you so much. Looks like I lost my screen, so. Next up, we have our truck routes and enforcement, our update on that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had we've heard from residents about traffic safety and speeding, and we talked about this previously at this committee, and since we've had a combined effort from several city departments as well as the court about increasing enforcement, police department, Mobile GR, and others have really worked together to see how we can make our neighborhoods safe, especially from trucks not using signed truck routes. So there's a collaborative effort. Not sure who's going to kick us off, but we'll hear from several speakers today.
Hello, my name is John Bartlett. I'm the City Transportation Engineer with the Mobile GR Department, and I'll go over a brief overview of the ordinance, kind of some of the concerns that we've had, and then lead off some of the discussion in terms of what's being done in the meantime to address some of these concerns. So the truck routes in the city are auxiliary routes to the U.S. or state highway. Their primary responsibility is to move goods and services to businesses, but also preserving the safety and quality of life of our residents at the same time. We do have an established truck route ordinance. It was last revised in 2020, but 2020, and before that it hadn't been revised since 1981. That was largely an effort to add roads that that didn't exist in the 1981 ordinance, such as the Wealthy Extension and Seward Avenue. Just some examples of truck routes in Grand Rapids. You can picture most of them, but major streets like Division, Michigan, Leonard, Fulton, Oaks, and Weston are examples of streets in the downtown, and we do have like sort of a blanket boundary of all over downtown. They were all truck routes. This is some of the language in our truck routes, and you can see the intent is for the orderly operation of trucks and streets in the city. But the order of priority are safety of our citizens, avoidance of unreasonable or unnecessary disturbance to neighborhoods, protection against deterioration of those streets, and then adequate truck service to businesses and residents in an expeditious manner. So there are some limitations regarding the truck routes. There are exemptions in the truck route ordinance, including city vehicles, emergency vehicles, transit vehicles, and then RVs. There are specific streets that have additional regulations. Federal law prohibits restrictions of roadways within 1 mile of the national network. That's to provide reasonable access to those roadways. In the case of Grand Rapids, that's US 131 throughout the city limits. And then one other just issue is that some smaller delivery trucks like U-Haul trucks and Amazon trucks might not exceed the weight limit, but may still be noisy or exceeding speeds in neighborhoods and causing resident concerns. So the large group of concerns we've heard about are speeding incidents on truck routes and associated safety risks on those routes, trucks not following designated truck routes and causing damage or deterioration of quality of life in neighborhoods, overloading to the streets and its impact on our road infrastructure, and then of course noise, pollution, and traffic congestion. So some of the options to address those, Mobile GR is currently reviewing our sign inventory to make sure that the truck routes are currently appropriately assigned. So we'll make recommendations and sign installations to make sure that those are appropriately signed. Ensuring adequate truck route signage exists would be that step, and then enhanced truck route signage where necessary. So identifying where they're missing and making sure that those are in. And then one step that I'm currently taking is doing some research to strategically enhance the non-truck route signage, looking at other communities that have signs that sort of bridge the gap between truck routes and no trucks, which are the only two signs we currently use. So some say local deliveries only or no through trucks, and so it gives that sort of middle ground, trying to create a classification of signage that makes it easy for the police department to enforce these rules. And then the police department is here to talk about some of their efforts in terms of weight restriction and evaluation in the field.
All right. Thanks, John. So what we really realized was that trucking obviously is a big business, and where there are established truck routes, we had the ability to enforce speeding, we had the ability to enforce truck routes, but the fines were so minimum that the trucks weren't deterred at all by the enforcement we were taking. We purchased, therefore, 2 truck scales. For under $10,000, our 2 of our traffic unit officers are going to be trained on those within the next month. And what that does is gives us the ability to enforce the most important violation of trucking in state law, which is the weight limits. And there are truck routes which have a weight limit of 10,000 pounds. There's truck routes that have a weight limit of 80,000 pounds. And the way the fine structure works per law is every pound over is 10 cents. It's those fines which send a message to the violators that Grand Rapids isn't a free-for-all for trucks. If you think about it, Butterworth is an 80,000-pound weight limit, regularly has 100,000-pound trucks traveling on it. That's a $2,000 fine, hand to the operator, which goes back to the company. And that's how the message is going to get across to these companies that Grand Rapids is serious about this. There are other jurisdictions I won't name, but there's another town in Michigan that did the same thing as we're doing, staffed up 2 officers with scales and training, and those 2 officers generated over $500,000 in revenue for the city. So we think that the $9,800 that we spent for these scales will pay itself back shortly. That money will go back into the general fund. We don't see this as a moneymaker. We're not looking to get business. This is in response to the complaints that we've heard from the community, and we're taking it very seriously, and we're looking forward to rolling out our enforcement actions in the middle of next month. Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions? Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, and Mr. Bartlett, too. This has been kind of one of my pet projects, I guess you could say, as a commissioner. One of my first neighborhood meetings I went to was a roundtable centered around truck traffic, and so it's something we're lucky to have. Not a lot of pedestrian accidents when it comes to truck traffic and truck violations, but it is besides the safety aspect of it, financially too. I know at a previous meeting, like just the overage in weight has an exponential deterioration effect on many of our streets. And so as we consider building good infrastructure and upkeeping good infrastructure, I think it's super important to consider that. So really excited about the progress that's going on in this area and look forward to seeing that continue. I did just have one question, though, in terms of our current truck routes. I know that there's been some different answers given around, changing neighborhoods, changing business districts, and how we can consider or reconsider, I guess, kind of where we allow trucks to go at the moment, and what that process looks like time-wise and logistically.
Yes, Commissioner. So one of the reasons that we did the update in 2020 was to establish a new baseline. So some of those changes could be made. One of the things that sort of drove that was the change for Cesar Chavez from a truck route to a major street when we took ownership back from MDOT. And so that was one of the change. That was like really the only street change that was made in that. But it was sort of a gateway to do that again. And the intent would be not to wait another 40 years for that, to do it on a like more recent cycle, which we'll probably be trying to kick off in the next year or so to do. But that'll probably involve a much more substantial public engagement. And we're trying to determine how best to do that, to not only hear from them, I don't want trucks on my road, but where do you think they belong in your community as well, so that, we can't just remove truck routes and not have some place left for them to go. We've still got to move goods and services to the city, but we want to work with the citizens to make sure that that's appropriate for their needs as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I realize it involves some larger conversations, but I think, certainly as we've seen a lot of growth in some of our neighborhoods and business districts, I've already heard of specific proposals too from the residents there, like saying, look, I understand nobody wants, truck traffic on their streets, but here's a street that is much more industrial that could be much more suitable for that type of traffic. So just hoping to initiate some of those conversations as soon as we can.
Thanks, Commissioner. Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes, for Chief, on the study that you said that the one jurisdiction, about $500,000, has there been any longitudinal study on that to see how it's decreased the traffic over time?
That's a great question. I can look into it for my traffic team, which has reached out to different municipalities across the state to see what works and what doesn't work. I don't know how long they've had theirs in effect, but we'll find out for you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. That was really interesting information. I know we were talking about that last week with our meeting with or a couple weeks ago with our meeting with the courts. And one of the things that we brought up is just sometimes truck drivers utilize, Google Maps to get them where they want to be from A to Z, and sometimes those maps don't line up with the truck routes in the city. And so how do we compensate from that we're not over policing when, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we need to look into. I don't know the specific ways that you can incorporate that into Google Maps or Waze or those other like wayfinding apps. It would be extremely helpful for them to overlay those things. In the meantime, we're going to right size our signage and then look into those other ways that we can positively affect it.
Awesome.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, one real quick thing Asante brought up that I wanted to make sure. So my reference to like the radius within 1 mile of the national network, that will always trump where the community wants the truck routes to be. We can look to find intermediate ways or levels of truck route signage, but we cannot prohibit trucks on those routes. So.
City Manager.
Madam Chair, there is, after that meeting, we did follow up, and there are apps that designate truck routes in various cities that professional companies do inform their drivers to use. I'm not now how frequently it's done, but there are applications that do that commercially trained drivers that work for large companies should have access to it.
I'm grateful for those pieces. I know I've got some truck drivers in my family, and I hear often of some of the difficulties they have navigating through certain states because of the way that their streets are made, and then what they are sent as to what is actually the actual route that they're supposed to take. So looking forward to hear how this impacts those changes, as well as the environmental impact that it has within our communities and our neighborhoods. I heard quite a bit of that from some of our constituents as well. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll move on to our city's first surveillance report coming from the Office of OPA.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. As it was indicated, this is our first annual surveillance report. For the agenda today, we're going to just kind of walk through the scope of Administrative Policy 1503. We'll talk about what is surveillance and what's not surveillance. We'll also discuss the instances of non-surveillance where we had inquiries from other departments. We'll talk about departmental surveillance use in departments that have used surveillance equipment, which is the Fire Department, Police Department, and Mobile GR. We'll talk about the impact on civil rights and liberties, and we'll also talk about looking forward. So, as we talk about surveillance, it's important that we remind you that the Public Safety Committee is the committee on surveillance based on the policy, which is 1503. So that's why we give you this report, and that's why we talk through it with this committee. Surveillance includes equipment and services. So when we talk about equipment, we're talking about equipment that's operated by or at the direction of the city, and is deliberately or inadvertently capable of capturing or recording data related to the activities of individuals on public or private property. Drones or unmanned aircraft and any attached equipment used to collect data are considered surveillance equipment. What is not, when we talk about surveillance services, we're talking about services that may be provided by a third party or that result in acquisition of data by the city or used for the purpose of monitoring or observing or analyzing individuals or groups, regardless of whether or not that data is obscured or de-identified in some way. When we talk about non-surveillance, that's anything that does not meet the criteria of that definition of surveillance. In addition, when we talk about cameras that are recording city buildings or facilities, that does not fall within surveillance equipment. Or if we talk about cameras installed to monitor or protect the physical integrity of infrastructure that we own, that is not included within this policy. In addition, there's another carve-out within this policy, and that is based off of the date that the original policy was signed. So the original policy was signed in March 24th of 2015. So essentially anything that was purchased or approved prior to the date of March 24th, 2015 does not fall within the purview of this policy. Now, if there were a material change in the functionality of that equipment that was purchased before that date, it would then fall within the purview of the policy. And then lastly, surveillance equipment that is incapable of collecting identifiable information due to the way it's designed or limitations in resolution or quality fall outside of this policy as well. So the reporting period for this report is January 3rd, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. Again, this was the first surveillance report. Essentially what we did is we went from the date that the new policy was updated, the date that the policy was updated and signed by the city manager to the end of that fiscal year. So during that information gathering period, we had discussions with several departments who made inquiries as to whether or not the equipment that they had fell within the confounds of this policy, and we appreciate them for their intentionality. Some examples of that include the city clerk's office, who does use video to monitor ballot drop boxes. However, that doesn't fall within the policy based on the fact that it is city-owned real property or infrastructure, and it's meant to monitor that. Additionally, the treasurer's office uses security cameras to detect cashier errors. Again, that's intended to record inside of a city building, and therefore that doesn't fall within this policy. Mobile GR uses intersection cameras to monitor real-time traffic patterns. Again, that doesn't fall within the confounds of this policy. And lastly, the police department uses automatic license plate recognition systems. And whereas the type of technology would generally fall within this policy, it does not based on the date of purchase, which was before March 24th of 2015. So we will walk through the summary of departmental uses, and we'll start with the fire department. So the fire department's source of surveillance is their drone technology. There was 361 total drone flights, and you can see the different numbers here, but the vast majority of those flights were training flights. It was used 7 times for structure fire incidents and once for a hazardous material flight, as well as 3 water rescue operations and 5 neighboring agency flights. A total of 32.6 total flight hours were used, and we have a breakdown by ward here. So we see that the majority, it was used most in the first ward, and then a little less in the second ward, and less than that in the third ward. This also was used on Grand Valley's campus, as well as over highways and expressways. There's been no complaints for misuse or overuse of GR Fire Department surveillance, and also there were no deployments that we determined that should have been subject to a warrant or a warrant requirement for court authorization. OPA didn't conduct any investigative audits, given the fact that there were no complaints related to it, and we see the total spend related to that was just over $2,000. When we look at the police department is a little different because the police department is expected to utilize surveillance equipment all the time. So the way the policy is designed is the police have to report instances where there's a violation, meaning that there was a non-use of surveillance equipment when there should have been a use of surveillance equipment. So there are 3 instances that are reported. One instance, and we have them identified based on the internal affairs number here. So one of those instances involved a body-worn camera during the arrest of a 56-year-old male in the city's 2nd Ward. Another incident involved when a body-worn camera was deactivated, during the incident that resulted in the death of a 26-year-old black male Congolese refugee in the city's 3rd Ward. And then the other incident involved a failure to reactivate body-worn camera during the arrest of a 54-year-old black male in the city's 1st Ward. There were no complaints filed for misuse or overuse of the surveillance equipment. As a result, there has not been an investigative audit related to that. Now, you have a copy of the report that goes into a lot greater detail as it relates to those items, notably on the second case identified as CR 22019 and CR 22038, because there are still pending legal matters associated with that. OPA has not had the opportunity to fully review, and it would, based on the city's collective bargaining agreements and the relevant laws, we have not done that at this point, but we do anticipate doing that once those matters are concluded. Well, we talked through Mobile GR. Mobile GR source of surveillance equipment was automated license plate recognition system, and it's used in the city's residential parking permit zones and our pay-by-plate areas. One of the things that happened in this incident was that Mobile GR was not able to produce the surveillance data. Now, we worked closely with Mobile GR, and they were extremely cooperative throughout this process. Essentially, what we determined is that Mobile GR had this equipment prior to these requirements for Administrative Policy 1503 coming into play. And the way that it was set up is that essentially the surveillance data was recorded in another language. That's the easiest way for me to explain it, right? Another digital language. So they attempted to provide us with the information, but the language in which it was recorded in, the digital language in which it was recorded in, which is a .xml, could not be converted into a way that we would be able to understand that data. We did attempt to work with their vendors, and they attempted to work with their vendors to get that done. Unfortunately, it was not able to be done. However, the problem has been rectified, and it is now being recorded in English, essentially, right, in a way that we will be able to receive that data. But we did find that that was a completely unintentional thing that occurred. We also did not receive any complaints regarding misuse or overuse of any surveillance equipment by Mobile GR. We have the total spend there, and it's about just over $208,000. As it relates to impact on civil rights, we did examine the impact on civil rights related to each of these incidents, and we found no adverse impacts on civil rights. We should note that, again, for that second incident listed on this slide, we have not been able to do that part of the analysis at this time. So we will include that in a future surveillance report. So looking forward, again, that license plate recognition system for Mobile GR has been rectified. We should also note that in the future, given the fact that there has been aerial surveillance equipment approved for the police department, that will be included in future reports because that will be a part of future fiscal years. And funding for that it's both in the police department, will now be in OPA's budget. So you'll see, although it's a police department item, you will see that funding from the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. Additionally, we anticipate submitting a formal request for documentation related to the other incidents from the police department once that time comes available. So what you'll see, we'll have time for questions, but you'll see that the surveillance report will be available on OPA's website today. And if you look at the packet that you have, at the back of that surveillance report packet, with created what we're calling the surveillance report at a glance, which is essentially a shorter document that kind of helps community just be able to look real quickly, understand the content of this report, and get to the details without having to dig through everything. But we also have the full report that will be available online as well. We'll also be providing a briefing to the Community Relations Commission on May 9th. And to our neighborhood associations on April 25th. Additionally, we'll have a Let's Talk About Surveillance, which will be on OPA's webpage. If you're not familiar with OPA's Let's Talk About It, it's just a place that we talk about tough issues that we may understand in government, but community's not doing every day. And we work through it so that they can understand it in an easily digestible way. So with that, I'd also like to thank our partners who are here today, which are the NAACP, who was pivotal in creating the surveillance policy and amending the surveillance policy, and they've been amazing partners throughout that process.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon, for that presentation. I'm glad that we were able to collect some data to give back to the community. I know there are a lot of concerns when this first came to the table, and we want to make sure that the community knows that we're being transparent and that we are providing accurate data to them about what's going on and how these services are being utilized within the community. So I'll turn to my colleagues and see if they have any questions. Mr. Brown?
Well, thank you, Brandon, and your office, and thank you, NAACP, for the work on this. And just so I'm clear, the 3 incidents that we had issues with, I'll just use that term, the 3 incidents, one I know we can't, has not been delved into, but the other 2 have been resolved without any, and the results was no civil liberties that were impeded.
Correct. So if we were to turn to that section in the full report, which would be on page 10, actually starting at page 9, we give a more expansive description of what happened in each of those incidents. We give detail on what happened with those arrests. And one of the incidents, for example, although the officer's camera wasn't activated, other officers' cameras were activated and therefore able to capture all of what occurred. So there was no adverse impact on civil rights, although it still was a problem that the camera is not activated. There's not an adverse impact on civil rights. So that's how we make those types of determinations. We look at the totality of the circumstances and evaluate were civil rights actually violated as a result of it, which is different than saying was the surveillance policy violated as a result of it. Any type of employee discipline or things of that nature that come as a result of failure to obey a policy happens within the scope of internal affairs for the police department, and that's not included in this report.
And a second question is backing up, I think it's on what page of your presentation where it says the reporting period and instances of non-surveillance. We talked about the GRPD's use of the automated license plate surveillance equipment, which was acquired prior to March 24th, 2015, is not part of this policy?
That's correct. So the way that the policy is designed is there is essentially a date that's set in stone that says that if surveillance equipment was purchased by a city department prior to this date, and there have been no material changes to that surveillance equipment, that does not fall within the scope of this policy. That doesn't mean that the equipment can just be used any type of way. It doesn't mean that there's no regulation related to it. But the reporting requirements and the requirement for the way that we acquire property, which means we come to this board first and then ask for that public hearing, then we have a public hearing before the city commission, and then there's an actual vote. Those elements of it are not, that particular technology is not subject to.
We can go on for now. I just gotta let it percolate in my head for a second.
Okay. I think I kind of hear what you're getting to is to then where does that come from, and who does that if you don't do that, capture that data and that information on that because it was before the policy, then who does and how can we access that?
Sure. So if there was a violation, so let's say that the community member was to make a complaint regarding technology being used improperly, and it was that type of technology, that type of complaint would still go. So first of all, let's say it's police. It still could be reported to the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. We would still be able to pass that through to the Internal Affairs Department or the Police Department, it will still be investigated. It will still go through process. It can still be subject to discipline if the officer acted improperly. The city manager will still have all the authority that he has to make determinations regarding those things, as well as the police chief. The difference is the specific policy limits the date in which all of these other requirements are a part of it. And that was before City Manager Washington amended this policy. That date was already in place in the original version of Administrative Policy 15-03. And before we go on, if I can, I realize I didn't thank my staff, and I want to make sure I thank them for the great work that they did on this, especially Brendan Arnold and Moran Kaval, who spent enormous amount of time in making sure that we were able to have a great report.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the extra clarification.
City Manager?
Thank you. I want to maybe clarify the drone report for the police department, and for the public to, it wasn't in this report because it was a different reporting period. When did the police department deploy drones? Not first get the approval, but actually started using them, and perhaps someone from the police department might. The fall of last year?
My understanding from hearing the police department whisper, it was in September.
Fall of last year. So then your next report will be when?
So our next report will cover that following fiscal year. City Manager, we need to discuss the exact date that we will do that reporting. Now, the first report required us to get a cadence of collecting information from department, but we're already in that cadence now. We've collected the majority of the data that's needed to do the next report.
We can talk online, but I want to make sure I understand. So this report covered fiscal year 23. So fiscal year 24's report won't cover the police drones. It'll be fiscal year 25 report.
Fiscal year 24's report will cover the police drones.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So the next report will, no.
Part of it.
Yeah, because the drones were deployed in fiscal year, they're deployed September of 23.
Which was
just fiscal year 24. Okay, so then your next report will cover it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to clarify that.
Mr. Kettle?
Just being Ed here, I would caution us to not take too narrow a view of surveillance. I understand the impact on local communities, but we have outside players that are floating around in other situations that, I think that are uncontrollable by local markets. There may be a time when we need to employ things like this, and if we've hamstrung ourselves too much, I don't know the answer. I'm just saying as a word of caution, I think we should kind of think a little bit bigger too, a little bit more globally than we are. I've been to countries where these are employed, these kinds of things are employed. It's uncomfortable sometimes to think about, but they work, and they get a lot of bad players off the street, not just local guys. I'm talking about international thugs and others, so.
Yeah.
Just saying. Thank you.
If I may, in Administrative Policy 1503 under Section 9, there is a temporary exemption for surveillance equipment or surveillance services used in extenuating circumstances, which is designed to protect against those type of situations.
Any other questions, colleagues?
Just wanted to commend the community efforts that are going to be given to bring forth the information. So hopefully there'll be some clarification that come through those particular process that you would bring forth. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and the efforts of your team to bring this information to us. And I think we have one presentation left. Chief, Public Safety Committee update.
Yes. If it's okay. I think I'm on my own here.
It'll magically appear for you.
Somebody's got my back.
We got your back, sir.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Santi. And so we're in April. Obviously, and 3 cold months are not suitable for scientific examination where it comes to data, but we're going to start looking at year-to-date numbers in this presentation. If you have not yet heard me talk about the Hyundai and Kia issue, or you're not yet tired about hearing about it, I'm sure you're getting there. And this is more expansive data back to May of 2022 when we saw the you might even call it a crisis of Hyundai and Kia thefts occur. Mostly, this was a social media driven trend where young people, word was spread out on social media that from 2011 to 2020 or 2021, both Hyundai and Kia had removed basic safety functions from their ignition systems. With the help of a flathead screwdriver, you could steal one of these vehicles in about 60 seconds, and kids across the country took up this challenge. And you can see June, July, August 2022 was the biggest spike. That's probably a record for the Grand Rapids area, and certainly probably a majority, I would say a vast majority of those were the Hyundais and Kias. And the dangerous thing is then when the kids who were as young as 11, obviously were not licensed, nor were they experienced drivers, created many dangerous situations. So I feel like as a city, we actually lucked out that we didn't see a worse result of this. However, we did see residual effects such as burglaries associated with stolen vehicles. They were so easy to steal, as well as a few shootings. So not something that we didn't take very seriously, but unfortunately, as I mentioned, it was mostly young people that were committing these crimes. And when you're arresting a 13-year-old for stealing a car, you know that prison isn't the answer, jail isn't the answer. So getting everybody else on board to try and figure out solutions to this has been a challenge. We got a lot of cooperation in the prosecutor's office to do diversion programs, a lot of cooperation with community groups, but also there was a call for Kia and Hyundai to step up and fix that. And I will say there's been some progress in that area. And I know in the next 48 hours or so, we'll be announcing Friday, Hyundai's actually coming to town to do a free event where they upgrade any of the ignition systems across the region that haven't been upgraded. We're going to have an event where anybody who owns a Hyundai can come get that ignition system upgraded to the point where it will no longer be easy to steal. So that will be coming out in the next day or so. We'll have some press on that. And as you can see, we are trending in the right direction. I'd like to get these numbers even lower. Moving on, aggravated assaults, as you can see, a little bump, but again, I wouldn't say it's statistically significant for this time frame. Along just a general trend in the colder months, that's about par for the course. Robbery totals, again, not statistically significant, the increase of 3, but a drastic reduction from the highs that we saw in 2021. Homicides, there's good news there, of course. Unfortunately, we did have one young man who lost his life earlier in the month, but that was our first recorded murder of the year, and this is the second longest the city of Grand Rapids has gone since the year 2000 for the first recorded homicide. Homicide clearance rate, talk about it a lot. We're still actively looking at not only recent cases, but cold cases. A detective team is doing a great job. The murder that I just spoke of, April 13th, was cleared that day by arrest, and related to that, the murder took place in the south end of town, but the offender fled actually fairly close to my house, so I was one of the first officers there. And just reflecting on everything I saw that day, I did make it down to the scene. I did speak to the mother of the deceased child, sister of the deceased. There was obviously a life taken and a lot of pain there. But also the offender in this case fled to a residence, like I said, fairly close to my house, so I was there right away. And the reason he fled there was because his family was there, and he wanted to hug his child, who was under 10 years old, and see other family members because he knew that the police eventually would catch up on him. And seeing the culture change in policing, witnessing the man being placed in custody in front of his family, and how the officers then interacted with his 5-year-old child, and how I've heard through many of the now adults that I've spoken to here and throughout my career, the negative impact that the first encounter that they have with a police officer was when their father was arrested or when their brother was arrested, something that I still think about quite a bit. To see the culture change and how the officers on scene, and granted I was there, and so the officers knew that I was watching, but how they treated this family and how there was handshakes and even some hugs as the officers departed there. A absolute culture change in policing when an individual can be placed in custody for murder. And one of the number one concerns is how this 5-year-old child views the police and how this family views the police. So I wish you guys could have all witnessed this. Like I said, I was there. I am out in the streets a lot. Occasionally I'll walk up to the scene and one of my officers will say, "Hey, Dad's here," referring to me. And I know that a lot of times when the boss is there, officers act a little differently, but also all of our officers wear those body-worn cameras. And me and my leadership team are reviewing on a regular basis, how are we treating people in the city of Grand Rapids? And I just want to say, night and day from when I was a brand new police officer, but also I've just seen the culture change since I've got here and how compassionate the officers were. So thankful that arrest, murder was cleared. Thankful that we haven't seen more murders, hoping that we continue to keep that trend. One other thing I'll mention, fentanyl crisis is always at the top of our minds. We're up to 11 overdoses this year in the city. That's 11 too many. Officers, and this is just police officers, at least 17 Narcan administrations outside of those fatal overdoses. But that's not everybody who's equipped by Narcan. Oftentimes the fire department will beat us there. They all have Narcan. They're given these things. So without that miracle drug, that number 11 would be, who knows how far that would be, obviously 28, 30, maybe more. So our vice team, I've talked about it before, doing what they can to investigate those overdoses and trail back as far as we can to see. We are interested in getting help for the addicts. We are interested in putting the people who profit from our dead citizens, putting them in prison, and we're doing what we can to see that. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief, for that. Colleagues? Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief. First, just a comment. I appreciate you sharing that story. I know when I did a ride-along last, granted it was probably a similar situation where it wasn't just them. I was present, but there was a pullover situation and someone was out late going to a party. But by the end of the interaction, the officer had her laughing and even had an invite to go to the party with her. So I think that I just wanted to share that too because I know that you all do some good work. So. Question-wise, you mentioned fentanyl. I know some communities are struggling with other substances creeping in. I get just curious to hear an update on if we're seeing any of those as well.
So, and I mentioned fentanyl, those updates to get more into the weeds. Each one of those 11 fatal overdoses, it was actually fentanyl and it was an even mix of meth and fentanyl and cocaine and fentanyl. And the information that we're having of whether the individual knew that there was the mix or not, obviously, the deceased can't inform us, but so we have seen it's not just fentanyl. It's what can we cut these other drugs with to make those drugs more potent. And obviously, we're not talking pharmacists or chemists here, and people are dying because of it. But it is a concern and should give everyone pause. Obviously, we're working with the Red Project downtown to add safety measures in for those addicted. We're all about providing services to those addicted, but this is definitely a crisis, and we're doing what we can on our part.
Great, thank you.
I'm encouraged by the data that's showed there because I'm aware of some of it, in particular around the homicides and aggravated assaults, and you pretty much level with the assaults, very much decreased around homicides. Very encouraged by the auto thefts and some of the others, drastically decreased. The reason why I say all that is because there's a narrative that crime is on the increase in Grand Rapids. How can we make sure that we get the message out that that is not the case and that crime is actually going in the right direction versus that narrative that is persisting out there?
Well, I think this helps, and I think, I have an interview just after this about that I think Fox asked me to talk to them about stolen cars. I will certainly say that the hesitancy on behalf of me to publicly celebrate too much is that I don't want, I mean, Mr. Brown, you're representative of Urban League as well, and you're involved in Cure Violence. I don't want it to appear that the police department's taking credit for what I've seen since I've been here is definitely a reduction in violent crime, especially committed by and committed upon our young people. We're doing everything we can, but I know there's so many others in the community that are too. So hearing those other groups celebrate the victories we have, I'll certainly say we have an excellent detective team. We have an excellent proactive group of police officers who are doing a phenomenal job. I'm just always hesitant to spike the ball and say we're good, because I won't, we're all looking for zeros, especially where it comes to murders. And I don't want to celebrate today and be on the scene of a murder tomorrow. And it just, I don't know if it's a superstition or what it is, but you are right. Crime is down in Grand Rapids.
Thank you. Commissioner Goy?
Thank you, Chief. The question I was going to raise was also raised already by Mr. Brown. But I do want to ask you, there's conversations in the community about whether or not there is enough police officers in your department, and whether it ought to be, or even whether it ought to be increased or even decreased. And then one question, can you talk about that a little bit? And also, I'd like to know, you talked about cultural change. What other changes have you seen in your department, or that you've brought to the department, that has maybe impacted these kinds of statistics?
So regarding the personnel issues, I am excited to get to the point where we hit that 302 number, where I can have the conversation, do we have enough police officers? And I think by the time we get there, we might be very much closer to the amphitheater, the soccer stadium, more residential housing. So it might be a conversation of we need more. And I mean, just to be honest, coming from me, I am the chief of police, I'll probably say we could use more. But as of right now, my focus has been, let's get to that budgeted strength level, which we were, far from at the beginning. We're up well over 280, putting other classes through, doing everything we can to get that number. We're doing well. This summer is looking a lot better than last summer. I've already got compliments. People are saying they're seeing more officers on walking the street on bicycles. The response times are lower. So I'll be able to make a better determination once we hit that 304 number. And I'm sure I'll be standing right here having that conversation with you. But I'll fall short of saying we need 350, whatever it is. I will make that assessment when we get there. But staffing is going a lot better than it was a year and a half ago. We're heading in the right direction, and I think we'll get there soon. As far as culture changes in policing impacting crime, one of the things is, in April of 2022, we had officer-involved shooting of Mr. Patrick Luoya, and anytime a very high-profile, controversial shooting happens in a city, whether it's the size of Grand Rapids or bigger, a lot of times it causes issues with staffing, mass exodus, but it also causes officers to sort of sit on their hands and take a less than proactive approach as they kind of sort everything out. I didn't see that here at all. We asked the officers to go out, give 100%. There were quite a few protests out here. They went out, and there are other places that the culture is go out, use tear gas as soon as possible, put handcuffs on us as soon as possible. We had 8 very large protests here. We had 0 arrests, and that was because of the police officers. We asked them to be 100% professional, even though some of them were still dealing with issues related to the shooting. It's a pretty big police department, second biggest municipal police department in the state of Michigan, but it's only less than 300 officers. A lot of the officers were friends with the officer that is now charged with murder and awaiting trial. And regardless of what you think about that shooting, that's a difficult thing to come to work and sort of process everything. So there were a lot of excuses that I could have heard for why the police wouldn't go out and give 100%. And nobody used it. They went out, they gave 100%. Word got out in the community, the law enforcement community, that we were more supported by the city, and that means the mayor, the city commissioner, the city manager, everybody that sits up here. And word got out that Grand Rapids Police Department is a good place to work, and we started getting more and more applications, increasing the number of officers, reducing response time, increasing productivity, and we saw crime and a lot of compliments in the neighborhood react because of that. So Yeah, it's been night and day since I got so many other culture changes. This doesn't necessarily impact crime, but it certainly impacts the culture. I got a message last night from a sergeant friend of mine in mass transit in Chicago that said, hey, we're taking jiu-jitsu training right now at the Chicago Police Academy. And the trainer here just gave a shout out to the Grand Rapids Police Department for being the model of how to do defensive tactics. Because 20 years ago when I went through the police academy, I learned boxing. And I learned you put those handcuffs on that arrestee as soon as you can. And if you got to punch him in the head and knock him out, that's how you do it. That is not the model to gain trust and love in city policing, but it's taken decades for us to get there. Now with jiu-jitsu, we're talking about control holds, and we're talking about optically something that looks more compassionate and more effective. So we're being seen not only, I mean, we all know that we're the best, just as Brad Brown said, he's the best fire department in the state. I'm going to say we're the best police department in the country. And when I hear from somebody across the lake, hey, you guys are known as like the model of how to do things right where it comes to control tactics or uses of force, that makes me feel really good. And that's been a culture change, a big culture change.
Mr. Kettle?
Just to follow up on that, I've been involved with the police department for a long time. First off, like any other kid, I was getting chased by him, West Sider, what are you going to do? But the cultural change is profound in the department. And it didn't come by accident, it came because of him. He brought in an entirely new way of thinking, impressed upon his officers that this is the right way to go. Those who couldn't, left. And amazing change. I never thought I'd ever see the day that the police department could just do such an intellectual shift like this. It's just incredible. So I know there are skeptics out there. I know people, and rightly so, but holy cow, from someone who's been close to the inside of that department for a long, long time, phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it. So my kudos to the chief.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you, Chief. I remember when he first came, I was like, impress me. So I remember having that conversation because we needed some change in this community. And, I know nothing is perfect, but I appreciate the time and energy that you have spent in creating some of that change in the community. And just continue to look for more change because change is always good. So, and we can always get better at everything that we do. So I thank you for the work that you're doing. Looking forward to seeing this next class of recruits come out and getting to that number where we can be a little more sustainable and more community-based in our city. So thank you. Colleagues, anything else? All right, we are adjourned at 1:46.